do that. There we go. Okay. All right. So a couple of things before we get started. I think I see there's so many names on the attendee list. Thank you guys all for coming. I'm scrolling through. I think I see a couple of people who were maybe at my last webinar or have been to some of my office hours in the past, but there are so many of you, so I'm not totally sure how many of you know me. I'm assuming most of you do not. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jelena. I am a TestMax instructor. I took my LSAT in June of 2017 and scored 178, which was really an amazing experience. And a lot of how that happened was that I went from literally knowing nothing about logic games, and on my first diagnostic, I tried to make an Excel spreadsheet, basically. Like, I drew a table instead of a diagram and was drawing in the little columns, like, okay, the cruise ship goes here. I really made learning logic games one of my biggest tasks in prepping for the LSAT, and I ended up being 100% correct on logic games in my actual official test. So from like on my first prep test, I missed pretty much all of the difficult questions. I figured out the elimination questions, but like my accuracy was no better than straight up just guessing. So that was really a lesson in how much you can improve in logic games if you try to. And when I ended up deciding that I was having way more fun with the LSAT than I would have in law school, and not going to law school and just starting to teach the LSAT, that is, I get super excited when I get a student who hates logic games and their worst section is logic games, because first of all, I believe everyone should love logic games, because how great is it that you're taking a test and you get to like spend 35 minutes doing puzzles in the middle of it. Puzzles are awesome. Also, it is the easiest section to improve on. So today is just going to be more of an overview. We're going to do some basic stuff, but if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of logic games and really start improving before your test, I guess most of you have heard now that there will not be a June in-person LSAT. It will be another LSAT-flex. So of course, those logic games are even more important now that they are 33% rather than 25% of your score. Claire is with me today. Claire is in the chat chatting with you. There's way too much going on in the chat for me to monitor it while I'm also teaching the webinar. So what we're going to do is Claire is going to be my lovely assistant and handle chat. I don't know why I'm pointing behind me as if the chat is behind me, but apparently I picture it behind me. And then I will pay attention to the Q&A area, although Claire may also pop in for questions that are more LSATMax questions versus like LSAT questions. She's kind of a little bit more of the business representative, while I'm more of the LSAT, I don't want to say guru because I hate that word. Maven, also ruined by social media managers. I guess expert, LSAT expert. Yes, so that being said, she will be there to help you in the chat. Now, I will monitor the Q&A, but I may save some of the questions that are not so much about the logic games topic for the end. I'm happy to stay after the time that we have scheduled for the webinar. At the end, I will hang out with you guys as long as you have questions. LSAT Goddess, oh, that's a little intimidating. I don't know, that sounds a little too 70s, although I was just like last night wishing that I could go back to the 1970s, so maybe that's a good thing. Figure out why all of the hippies grew up to be such conservative people. So I'm happy to stay and answer non-logic games questions at the end. I know there's a lot going on. This is a crazy time in the world, especially in the LSAT world right now. And yes, technically coffee, but yes. So I do want to get through the logic game stuff in the hour that we allotted for it, so that anybody who really is just here for an hour of logic games and has to drop off after that can go. But don't worry if I don't get to your non-logic games questions in the middle of the webinar. either Claire will help you with them or I will help you with them at the end. So one more time, chat, Claire is handling. If you want to ask me a question, go over to Q&A. One more thing, couple more things actually before we get started. We do have a reading comprehension webinar tomorrow at noon. So if you are taking LSAT Flex, you might want to be paying attention to both logic games and reading comprehension, because they are going to be the equal value to LR, which they are not usually. Usually LR is going to be 50% of your tests. Now it is 33, 33, 33, or 33.3 infinity, since LSAT students tend to be sticklers for accuracy. Last thing before we get started, we do also have a podcast now, and I am one of the hosts of the podcast. If you were in Brandon's webinar yesterday, he is the other host, and together we walk you through hot topics and important things about the LSAT. This week's episode is all about improving on logic games and reading comprehension before the LSAT Flex, what you can do if you are someone who's already studying and you really need to pull up your section scores on those sections. So we would love to share some techniques with you that are a little more advanced than what I'm going to be able to go over today in the webinar. For those, go to the Legal Level podcast, and Claire will be putting a link to that in the chat, and maybe she'll put a link later at the end of the webinar too. If you do enjoy the podcast, we always appreciate ratings and reviews. As a new podcast, reviews really help us get to more people. So if you have the time to give us a little 5-star, we would sure appreciate that. So, okay, let us talk about logic games. Let me just get a couple of these quick questions, because I still do see people joining. So let me get a couple of these quick questions, and then we'll get into this presentation. There's a couple of these that are like 1-sentence answers. Alexa, as an elementary education student, is that a disadvantage to get into law school? Absolutely not. I've had everybody from like music theory and music composition majors, science majors. There's no single major that is a shutout for law school. People who are in the arts have a little bit harder time just because their grading is a little bit different, so they don't always have a GPA that can be treated comparably to like a STEM program GPA. And then people who've attended multiple institutions, or who've attended institutions that have like undergraduate strictly curved grades that have hurt their GPA, that might hurt them. But there's not a major that they're going to be like, oh, you do elementary education, you can't be a lawyer. There's a need for lawyers in every field. And if you actually have some experience in education, I think that's even something that you could put on your application and talk a little bit about why that has allowed you to be somebody who's interested in law, what you learned from teaching that got you interested in law. Do law schools completely depend on LSATs, Courtney? No, but it's about 60% of the score that they give you to determine how seriously they're going to consider your application. We do law school admissions webinars that go into a little bit more of this, but yes, it's about 60%. Your GPA is 40%, so you really do need it. Do students often struggle to complete the full test in the allotted time period? Absolutely, yes. It is not designed for the average student to be able to complete it in the allotted time period. And we're not going to talk timing today, but in that podcast episode that Brandon and I did this week on improving quickly on RC and LG, there is a lot of stuff about planning for how much you actually can complete versus planning for how much you would like to be able to complete. So completely normal. Most people do not finish the whole thing. Suggested classes, Alexa, that may help in law school. Study writing. Most lawyers are terrible writers, and being a good writer will help you get on law review, which is really good for getting jobs. So take some writing classes. Does the podcast touch upon accommodations and learning disabilities? We have not done a podcast on accommodations and learning disabilities yet, but that is a great topic for a future episode, and we definitely will be covering it. And Brittany, there will be a webinar for how to complete a successful personal statement. We talk about that in every law school admissions webinar that we do. So maybe Claire can put in the chat some information about any of our upcoming law school admissions webinars. I have one upcoming. I think there are others as well. So, and is the podcast LSATMax related? It is to LSATMax instructors, and it is sponsored by LSATMax, but you don't have to have the premium course to use any of the tips. It's general LSAT advice. And yes, you do take legal writing law school, but unfortunately, a lot of people do not take that course seriously. And there is a movement in law school to solve this problem right now. A lot of law schools are making people take writing more seriously. But as far as people who are already practicing out in the world, who maybe went to law school in the 90s, the 2000s, even the 80s, a lot of them are not as good of writers as they really should be. Okay, let's see. All right, so there's still a bunch more questions in here. I'm gonna save a lot of these for the end. Those were kind of the ones that I felt like I could answer in a sentence. Oh, and Alexandria, I'm mostly not watching the chat, but I saw a podcast in here. So regarding the LSAT Flex, how it differs from the original, that was actually we did a special LSAT Flex update. It is, I think, the second episode down in the feed, so check that out for Flex. All right. So let's see, closing out that, and then I'm going to bring up a presentation here. So I'm going to share screen from my iPad over here so that we can talk through some things. All right, so for a little bit here, I am going to pay attention to the presentation, and out of the Q&A for the most part. I will get to your questions as we go through them. Please keep leaving them, and I will get to them as we can. Okay, so over the next hour, we are going to discuss what is generally the most intimidating and kind of the weirdest section of the LSAT. My favorite section of the LSAT, I literally want to get the license to the logic games format and start making more of them and publishing books of them. You too can love logic games. The real difference between logic games and the rest of the test is that they are a pure test of your ability to reason logically, even though there is a section called logical reasoning. Logic games are really all about logical reasoning, whereas logical reasoning is about logic plus argumentation. Logic, you don't have to do any argumentation. All you have to do is pure logic on logic games. So what is a logic game? Every single logic game starts by explaining to you a particular imaginary situation in a brief paragraph, and then it gives you a few rules that control the situation they just described. The questions are, in essence, just asking you to apply those rules to figure out how the situation can play out. In other words, for any of you who have done any kind of computer programming classes in school, which these days, I think for the younger set is almost everybody, it's algorithmic reasoning. All you're doing here is algorithmic reasoning. It is also the definition of pure logic, even though in the day-to-day typical world, we often use the term logic to mean the opposite of emotion, as in, oh, he's very logical in his decision-making process. You know, you might use that to mean that he doesn't bring a lot of his feelings into his decision-making process. She made a very logical choice about her relationship. That's not actually what logic means. What logic means is the use of a fixed set of rules to determine the validity or invalidity of statements. And that is what you're doing in logic games. You use a fixed set of rules to determine what could be true, what must be true, what could be false, and what must be false. So, two different types of logic games. The vast majority ask you to do one or both of two tasks. One is sequencing, which is putting things into a particular order. And the other is grouping, which is separating things into particular groups. In other words, things like team A and team B, in and out, barrel 1, barrel 2, barrel 3. We're going to do one of each of those games today. So a sequencing game requires things to be put in order. In other words, for instance, the situation might be something like there are 6 runners: Alice, Bob, Charles, Daisy, Edna, and Franco, 6 of them in all. And they're running a race. So they could give you rules about it, telling you things like Bob finishes before Edna, but after Daisy. Or Alice finishes neither first nor last. So if we have places for 6 runners, then if Alice does not finish first and Alice does not finish last, and the questions are going to ask you things like, if Bob finishes third, which of the following could be true? It's all those 4 things. It's all about what must be true, what could be true, what must be false, what could be false. Those are really the only 4 things that you need to know about any game. Whereas with a grouping game, you might get a situation more like this. Victoria, Walter, Xavier, Yolanda, and Zeke are diplomats. There's 5 of them, and they are going to be sent to 3 different countries: country A, country B, country C. I guess, let's see, Algeria, Burundi, and Chile. And the rules will be things like Xavier and Zeke must go to the same country. They hang out with each other. They insist on going together. Or Yolanda does not go to country C. Or Wanda and Victoria go to different countries. The questions are going to say things like, if Victoria goes to country B, which of the following cannot be true? Again, 4 things you need to know. I'm going to keep repeating this so that you guys learn it and internalize it. It's all about must be true, could be true, must be false, could be false. All right. So what the hell does all of this have to do with law school? Very good question. Also the subject of our very first podcast episode, if you go back and listen to that for a deeper dive into this. May seem like the 2 things that we just discussed, putting runners in order and assigning diplomats to various countries, does not have to do with the law and should have nothing to do with law school. That is not the case, though. This is all about managing information and applying rules to that information, which is basically being a lawyer. One common law school task that is very similar to logical games is statutory analysis. So statute is just a lawyer word for law, and that's what Congress and state legislatures create. In other words, rules. So like when we say that Xavier and Zeke have to go to the same country, that is an arbitrary rule created by somebody else, much like many laws. It's just that in law school, instead of variables like runners in a race or diplomats going to countries, the facts of your particular case that you're working on are going to be governed by the rules written in those statutes. If you're going to do your job correctly, you need to know which rules apply to which facts and what happens once those rules are applied. So an example that Brandon always uses that I have lifted from him is, in law school, you might deal with a situation where the rule is that someone who has all 4 wheels in the intersection when the light turns red has run the red light. And the second rule is if someone runs the red light, then they deserve a ticket. The facts of your case might be your client had all 4 wheels in the intersection at the time the light turns red. And then you would have to be able to determine that in this case, the law does apply, that your client has run the red light, and if they ran the red light, they deserve a ticket. So now, of course, then you get into the argumentation side, which is, but there were mitigating factors, yada, yada. But point is, you need to understand whether or not a particular rule applies to your particular case. And logic games is 100% all about applying rules to particular cases. When the conditions are thus, the rules apply this way. All right, so let's talk about that first skill we talked about, sequencing. So let's stick with our initial example of people running a race. I'm going to get rid of our diplomats for right now. All right, so we're also going to get rid of this Alice rule because this is not going to stay in here. So we have our variables and our 6-slot setup. And then we have our first rule, Bob finishes before Edna, but after Daisy. Let's go ahead and label our blanks so that we know which order we are placing the finishers in. Let's also say that Alice finishes before Bob. So we're actually going to add Alice on here. She also has to be before Bob. Franco finishes after Daisy. Ooh, this is getting messy. I might have to rewrite this on the side somewhere. And Franco finishes before Cindy. All right, so one of the most important ways to figure out more about a sequencing game is to connect rules together. And if a variable shows up in more than one rule, those rules can often be combined. I did that in a little bit of a quick way here. Let's go back over it and show it slowly. So if Bob finishes before Edna, but after Daisy, and Alice finishes before Bob, Franco finishes after Daisy, and Franco finishes before Cindy, you can see that there are shared variables in a lot of these rules. I'm circling all of the variables that are in more than one rule. So when you have shared variables in multiple rules, you end up with what we call an ordering chain. In other words, what I did up here, I will do it larger so you can see it better. B, E, F, C. So notice that we've represented all of these rules. We've still got D finishes before B, who finishes before E, A finishes before B, D finishes before F, F finishes before C. We've just chained them all together. Now, we can't use these rules to necessarily place any of these variables exactly, but we can start to figure out where they have to go. So notice you can essentially use these little horizontal lines. Let me get a different color here. These little horizontal lines that connect our variables, that tells us how many have to go after / before them. So for instance, if you notice that D has 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4 horizontal lines in the chain after it, we can see that 4 variables have to go after D. D cannot go after B, D cannot go after F, and because C and D have to go after F and B respectively, D cannot go after those either. So, first thing that we want to think about is which of our variables can go first. There are only 2 variables in this ordering chain that do not have to wait for anybody to go before them. So you've got either A or D in this very first slot here. Now, that is super restricted. F, C, B, and E are restricted out of that. Now let's think about the end here. There's only 2 variables, and notice in some logic games, you will have what we call randoms, which are variables that are not affected by any of the rules. This is a no random game. We've got A, B, C, D, E, F. All 6 of our variables are on the ordering chain, so we don't have to worry about randoms. So for our last slot, there are only 2 variables that do not have to wait for anybody to the right of them, which means that we've got C or E in our very last slot. Let's also think about these middle variables. So let's say, okay, B has to have E after it, so of course B cannot be last. B has to have A before it, so B cannot be first, but B also has to have D before it. So notice 2 horizontal lines to the left of B. That means 2 spaces that B cannot go in, because if you tried to put B here, then you've only got room for one of A or D, not both. So you can go through, it's possible to go through this whole game and figure out for each of these what their restrictions are, but instead of doing that with our pretend game, go ahead to page 4 of your packet, which Claire should have put the packet link to download that packet in the chat. Maybe she will do it again for you right now in case anybody has not downloaded the packet. And we are going to work through our first game together. So this one we're going to do together, and I will experiment with asking you guys some questions as we go. Though there are so many of you in chat that it may be a little difficult to talk with folks. So this is a real game. This is from practice test, what is it? It's practice test 71, section 2, game 1. So this is a real LSAT sequencing game, and we are going to do it in the way that we would do it on the LSAT. All right. So let's begin with our basic setup. So step 1 when you are doing any logic game is identify a variable set. Sometimes you're going to have multiple variable sets, sometimes you will only have one. So in this case, our variable set is our films, and we've got fiesta, glaciers, hurricanes, jets, kangaroos, and lovebird. No two of these films can be released on the same date, and the release schedule is governed by the following conditions. All right, so we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 films released. None of them at the same time. Note the number of your variables, 6 of them, and then we go on to the rules. So rule number 1 of sequencing is that you represent your basic sequencing rules by placing a horizontal line between the variables, and your variables should be ordered in the same way that you would order them on the diagram. In other words, in this case, our diagram shows that we have number 1 as the farthest left space. So anything that is going earlier should be on the left. So if Fiesta must be released earlier than both Jets and Lovebird, we can use this little bracket looking function here to do F before J and L. All right, Kangaroos must be released earlier than Jets, and Jets must be released earlier than Hurricanes. Let's go ahead and number these rules so that when I go back and ask you about them, you can refer to them by number. And lastly, rule 3, Lovebird must be released earlier than Glaciers. All right, now first question, and I am going to pop up this wild chat. Let's see. Oh, and I guess Claire's already reminded you about choosing between panelists and attendees. Let's see. And actually, okay, cool. So tell me, and I am watching the chat now, which of these rules can we combine with each other? So for instance, say rule X and rule Y can be combined. Right. 1 and 2 and 1 and 3 are both correct. Yes, they have shared variables. Note our shared variables. J is shared. And let's do another color of ink. L is shared. So now let's think about, do we have randoms? Okay, F appears in at least one rule, G appears in at least one rule, H appears in at least one rule, J appears in at least one rule, K appears in at least one rule, and L appears in at least one rule. So We have no randoms. Everybody's going to end up on the ordering chart. So let's go ahead and start by combining rule 1 and 2. So we've got F before J and before L. However, from this rule, let's see, actually, I don't have enough space here. Let me draw this lower. So F, J, L, but J also has to go after K and before H. Now, let's go ahead and add our third rule onto the chart. L goes before G. All right, now let's think about what we can do to these rules that, now that we've got a complete ordering chart, will allow us to infer what can go on our master diagram. This thing with blanks up here is called a master diagram. So which of the players on the diagram is eligible to go first? Which are the players who can go in the first slot? Very good, F or K. And which players can go last? H or G, exactly. Very good, you guys are good. Picking this up quickly. All right, so we've got our first and our last. Now let's think about what the others can do. And now I will note as we're going through this, because there are some people on the webinar who are a little bit more advanced and are not kind of having their first exposure to logic games right now. For those of you who are a little more advanced, in these simple ordering games that tend to come like first in your test, it is for many people possible to go through the questions based on just this ordering chain here rather than filling out a master diagram. If you are getting things 100% right while doing that, go ahead and do that. But if you are not yet getting things 100% right while just using the ordering chart, then fill out your master diagram. I still fill out my master diagram even though I have students who will do the questions just based on the ordering chain. I like having a diagram and it doesn't take that much longer. It's like a little security blanket for me. All right, so J, how many players have to go before J? Very good. Which is the master diagram? The master diagram is the thing with blanks that I'm writing in right now. So if J has to have 2 players before it, we're going to place what we call a restriction, sometimes also called a not law, on space 2. Because if we placed J in space 2, we would only have space for one of K or F to go before it. It's not Mabel, it's not 2 players can, it's 2 players must. Look at the horizontal lines here. So J has 2 lines to the left that connect it to other players. So therefore, J must wait for 2 other players to go before J can go. There must be 2 players before J. All right, how about L? How many players have to go before L? Exactly, just 1. Little bit of a trick question. A couple people are saying 2. Notice that that is only, so let's go do a little tiny hypothetical up here. L is only directly connected to 1 player to the left. L has to wait for F, but it would be entirely possible to honor everybody's position by putting F, L, and then K, J, and then I guess you'd have G, H, H, G. We don't know what order those would go in. That is entirely possible. This is the biggest beginner mistake that people make in sequencing, is that you think that a player has a relationship to a different player's relationships. I know that's a little bit of a confusing sentence if you're new to logic games, but a player has a direct ordering relationship only to those other players to which it is attached by a horizontal line on the ordering chain. For instance, L and H are not attached, so they have no relationship. It would be valid to do the whole K, F, K, J, H thing and then put L before G. So you could do, let's do another conditional over here. This one can be pink, that's fine. 6. You could do K, F, J, H, L, G, and that would also be a valid solution for the game. So, Chadwick, we do not break the rules in logic games, but if there is no rule preventing something, it's possible, and there is no rule preventing L from coming after H. So anything, notice these, let's see, let me erase these circles here. The only relationships that are absolute are the relationships represented by these horizontal lines. Anything else is possible unless you have made a deduction that shows that based on the existing rules, it is not possible. The only relationships that we know about are those represented directly by lines on the chart. So H has a relationship to K because it goes through J. So this is a relationship. K must be before H because K must be before J, which must be before H. H and G have no relationship to each other. They're not attached at all. H and L have no relationship to each other. They're not attached. It is all horizontal. It doesn't go, the relationship doesn't go like zigzag and then to L. You can't go backwards and forwards in the chain at the same time. Only those variables that are attached by a chain. Can it be F, K, J, H, L, G? Yes. F and K, notice there are no, erased F instead of circling it. F and K, notice there are no lines attaching them. That's a whole blank space between them. They can have any relationship to each other that they want. They can go in any order that they want. So let's talk a little bit more about placing restrictions. Get my blue pen back. Since FL, I have now screwed up my little bracket here. I'm going to redraw that. There we go. That's the mistake you've been making? Okay, yes, that is the most common beginner mistake with ordering games. I did it too when I was first studying. It is super, super easy to do. Yes, there is always more than one possible answer. In fact, there are only a few games, and we call them guru games in the LSATMax course, where you can actually, in your setup, reasonably within the time allotted, figure out all of the possible solutions to a logic game. There are a few, and in fact, in every possible logic game, it is possible to figure out all of the solutions. It's just for some of them, there might be several dozen, so you're not going to spend the time when you're setting up your game. What you are figuring out is how the rules affect the set of possibilities. So let's see. I want to get to the questions on this, so I'm going to say something that I don't have time to super get into, but for some people it makes things click. A logic game begins with as many possible solutions before you have, when you only have your variables and your number of spaces for them, you have as many possible solutions as there are possible combinations of variables, which is a huge number. Every single rule in a logic game functions to remove a set of possibilities from the list of possible combinations of variables that could fill out the diagram. As you get through the rules, you will also make deductions that further remove sets of possibilities. On certain logic games, your rules are so strong that they remove all but a handful of possibilities. Those are the ones we call guru games. We probably will not have a Guru Games webinar, but we do them as office hours when we do our office hours binges. So, right, it's about one of the right possibilities. Okay, so we are going to go through the questions, Ankush. Let us, in fact, go to a question now. So, question 1, which of the following cannot be true? A, Fiesta's released 2nd. B, Glaciers is released 3rd. C, Hurricanes released 4th. D, Kangaroos released 4th. E, Kangaroos released 5th. And Chingiz is already saying E. That is correct. Tell me, why is E correct? Let's go back to our diagram. Someone tell me why E is correct. Very well done that you're all jumping to it right away. Does not have, now, right, some of you guys have the right logic, some of you guys have the wrong logic. Indeed, K must come before J or H. In other words, let's think about restrictions. So K has 2 lines to the right, which means that K has to wait for 2 variables to the right. So K can go no later than 4. Does not have to go 4, can go first. But K can go no later than 4th. K cannot go 5th. So D is okay because K can go 4th. K can go no later than 4th, giving us E. Now, notice this is cannot be true, which we also call must be false on the LSAT. In other words, if your correct answer must be false, then your 4 incorrect answers here are all things that could be true. They don't necessarily have to be true, but they could be. Question 2, which one of the following must be true? Fiesta is released earlier than Hurricanes. Let's look back up here. Is it true that Fiesta is released earlier than Hurricanes? Yes, exactly. Because again, these are connected because they are directly connected by a chain of horizontal lines. Notice when you have done your homework, when you've done your setup properly, it is super easy to find the right answers. This is the other big mistake people who are new to logic games make. They think, oh, I need to hurry through making my diagram and my deductions so that I have enough time to solve the questions. That is false. You do not need to hurry. In fact, when you are first learning logic games, you should be doing untimed practice so that you do not hurry, so that you do not teach yourself to hurry. So that you are doing all of your deductions beforehand and not rushing into the questions, because if you've done everything beforehand, your questions should take you like less than a minute each. Yeah, we're all that person when we start. That's, you know, nothing to be embarrassed about, but it is an incorrect way to do the logic games. So do your work up front. Why not C? Kangaroos released earlier than glaciers. Notice K has a direct relationship to J and H. K has no direct relationship to G. Moving on to our third question. If glaciers is released earlier than hurricanes, then each of the following could be true except. So what does could be true except mean out of those 4 types of information that we use? It means the correct answer must be false. Exactly. In other words, your 4 incorrect answers are going to be could be true. Your correct answer is going to be must be false. All right. So if we go back up, let's see, let's just redraw our little diagram here. So we've got K, Z, K, F, J, L. And now we're going to change the way that this GH relationship goes so that G also has to be before H. Exactly. Lovebird now cannot be released 5th because Lovebird now can be released no later than 4th. Boom, you guys are good. You guys are good. So this is called a conditional question. In a conditional question, you often have to draw a hypothetical, which is a new little diagram with the conditional thing done. All right, if Lovebird is released earlier than kangaroos, so this is going to be a version where we go F, L, J, and then actually we're going to do Lovebird is going to be before kangaroos, which is before J, F, K, J. Lovebird is released earlier than kangaroos, J. L has to be before G. And G has to be before H. All right. So if we release lovebird earlier than kangaroos, which of the following could be true? Sorry, oh, the lasso select to select a section and move it down with you. Okay, I will try that for next time. Sorry about the pace, Uchichi. We have a grouping game to get through here as well, so I'm trying to move quickly through our sequencing game, but I am happy to stay after and go over any questions that you have questions about. Nor maybe, it seems like, okay, good. All right, maybe a little connection blip, cool, okay. All right, so you guys are all correct about D here. Very good, you are fast. Jets could be true, could be released earlier than glaciers because, again, any variable that does not have a line connecting them does not have an ordering relationship. Yeah, I don't know why undoing that did that, but Jets is released earlier than glaciers. Why G before H on question 4? Because now, you're right. I just dragged that down from here. This is glaciers released earlier than hurricanes. So yeah, it should actually be. Good catch. Very good. All right. Question 5. Okay, question 5 is a rule substitution question. These are particularly hard. I actually do a new office hours format that is just about rule substitution questions, but we do not have time to get into everything about rule substitution questions here. I will just give you the basics of rule substitution questions is that they must perfectly replace the existing rule. In other words, they must prohibit everything the existing condition prohibits. So in this case, the existing condition is F before J and L. We are trying to have the exact same effect. In other words, it must not allow J or L to go before F, but it also cannot prohibit anything new. The master diagram did not change for question 4. That's called a conditional. So if we look at these rules, so in other words, A, only kangaroos can be released earlier than Fiesta. That would be essentially saying that only K and F can go first, which does match the impact of the F before J and L rule here. Kangaroos must be earlier than lovebird. Well, that's not actually going to do what we, let's see, let me see if I can do that lasso select here. So let's lasso select this whole thing. Drag it down. The problem is, okay, I think this is, okay, this is, I need to practice this when we're not in the middle of a game, but okay. So the correct answer here, let's just get through this rule substitution question so we can go to grouping and then we can come back to it if you guys are still confused at the end of the webinar. So the correct answer here is A. The reason for that is the primary function of this F before J and L rule here is that it ensures that only K and F can go first, because the other rules then fill in those other relationships. They're still going to be the same because of the other rules. Only kangaroos can be released earlier than Fiesta. In other words, Fiesta is going to go no later than second and only K can go before it. So you're still, if Fiesta can only go first or second, you're still going to end up with J and L, G and H after Fiesta, because it's going to go no later than second and only K can go before it, because on our original diagram that I have now dragged to God knows where, only K and F had no left lines after them. What about E? Why wouldn't E work? Well, because that only does half of what that rule did. That rule did two things. It made sure that only K and F can go first, and it made sure F can go no later than second. E only does half of it. So it would replace like 50% of the rule. You need to replace 100%. Make sense? Right, same thing with C. It's only doing half. They have to both be true. We need these two. If you put them together, that works. But it's only doing half. Each of them, Fiesta must be first or second, must be true, and either Fiesta or Kangaroos must be released first, must be true. So they're those two, that's what we call a trap answer. It is half right. All right, we are going to move on to a quick grouping game. Now, I know I just filled your heads with sequencing, so we may not remember exactly what grouping games are. I will do the setup and rules for you, but I want you guys to start working on it while I'm doing this. So if you have a little bit of paper or an iPad with you, please go ahead and start working on it, because after I do the setup, I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to see how many questions you can answer. I'll take that time to kind of look through some of the questions and get ready for our Q&A after the webinar, and then we will talk about the questions. Now, this is a little bit of a challenging game. We're going to learn a couple of new things as we go through it, so we may be moving a little bit fast as we go through the setup. I am out of the Q&A for right now. I'll come back to the chat function once we are talking about the questions, but feel free to drop your questions in there, and Claire will help you with questions as I'm setting this up. All right, so this logic game happens to be from the September 2018 LSAT, and it is game, is it game 2 or game 3 on that LSAT? I think it's game 2. Yeah, it is game 2. So September 2018, game 2, 6 park rangers. So we've got Jefferson, Kachugi, Larson, Mendez, Olson, and Pruitt are assigned to monitor one of 3 areas, area 1. So this is a grouping setup. We are going to set up area 1, area 2, and area 3 in a national park. At least 1 ranger, but no more than 3, is assigned to patrol each area. 3, 1, 2, 3. So the maximum is 3. Now, we have 6 park rangers, and now all of a sudden, we've got 9 slots potentially to put them in. So this is a signal that we might have rangers going in multiple places, except for 1 of 3 areas. So, all right, that means that we are going to have potentially an uneven number of rangers. There might be more rangers in one area than the other, because our 6 park rangers can each only monitor 1 of the 3. So if we think about it, we've got a total of 9 places for them to monitor. And if we distributed the rangers evenly, then there would be 2, 2, and 2. But you could theoretically have 1, 3, and 2, 2, 3, and 1. So let's see what the rules give us as far as a restriction on how that can possibly happen. But we have to have at least 1, so no zeros are allowed, and we have a maximum of 3. Okay, so our first rule is going to be Mendez is assigned to area 3. So we'll go ahead and put Mendez in area 3. Neither Olson nor Pruitt is assigned to area 1, so let's restrict Olson and Pruitt from area 1. Notice how this impacts the distribution. If we now have 3 that are not assigned to area 1. So if we just stopped here, if these were all the rules, the only way for area 1 to have 3 park rangers would be to have J, K, and L. All right, Larson is assigned to the same area as K or M, but not to the same area as both. This is a tricky one. So we've got L and K or M, but we also have L not with one of K or M. So whichever L is with, the other one is not there. There are a couple of other ways we could represent that as a conditional as well. That's a little complicated for what we're doing right now. Let's just leave it as L has a love relationship to one and a hate relationship to one. If this one is a conditional, however, if Olson is assigned to area 2, so we're going to use a subscript, if Olson in 2, then Jefferson is assigned to the same area as Koguchi. However, otherwise, in other words, if Olson is not into, then J and K must be assigned differently. 2 setups. Oh, thank you for that segue, Amir. That is exactly where I was going. There is a technique that makes this game doable. Like, straight up, it is almost impossible to do this game without it, called scenarios. That is actually not a true contrapositive. So there is, in conditional rules, typically you get a contrapositive. This one is a little bit different because it says otherwise. So I actually diagrammed the otherwise separately. In other words, if not. So if not is a negated sufficient condition, if you're familiar with that terminology. Typically a standard contrapositive would be like, if O, then F, and then you flip it and reverse it, the law of Missy Elliott, not F, then not O. That's not what's going on here. This is a very special and unusual kind of rule, and it's diagrammed differently. Now, very good inference, Amir. You can make 2 setups because Olson can only be in area 2 or 3. So let us do exactly that. So let's do like setup A. And let's go ahead and put O and 2 here. Setup B. The left corner total of 9, that is because the total number of spaces that could possibly be occupied is 9, but really it would be more proper to call this 6. So let's go ahead and fix this and call it 6 because we're placing 6 players. So, all right, now we've got 1 setup with O and 2, which means that J and K are now a block. They have to be placed together. 1 setup, now remember we still can't put P in 1. And this another setup where J and K are a hate relationship. They cannot be together. Now we still have to have L with 1 of K and M and L not with both of K and M, which means that K and M are also what kind of relationship? Can K and M go together? K and M cannot go together. Good, right. So we have a deduction. K and M must be separated. So in both of these cases, in fact, in all cases, K cannot go in 3. Very good. All right. This is a start. This is not all the deductions, but I do want you guys to have a chance to play with this a little bit. Why can't K and M go together? Because L must be with one of them, but not with both of them. So L could not possibly be with one of them, but not with both of them, unless K and M were not both together. Right, condition 3. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes on your own to do as much of this as you can. I have not done everything in the deductions for you. I want you to have a little bit to play with. So feel free, if you want to go ahead to the questions just with the setup that I've done for you, you can, but you don't necessarily have to. You could play with the scenarios a little bit more. So let's see, it is 1:02, and I'm going to give you guys until 1:07, and then we will come back and go over as much of the questions as you've been able to get through. And I'm going to go refill my little coffee while you do that. So I'm going to stop my video for 1 second because I need more drink if I'm going to be talking this much. All right, let's come back together here. So hopefully you guys got a chance to go over some of these questions. And some of you have already gotten have already gone through. Let's see, Yoli, let me check yours. Yoli, you've got all but 2 correct, which is pretty darn good. And I'm sorry, I told you guys wrong. It's September 2016. I wrote a 6 in my notes that looked like an 8. It's September 2016. I told you guys wrong. All right. Yes. So notice are you talking about, Alberto, you're talking about the first question, the elimination question? Yes, that is correct. So that would happen to be E on the elimination question. Now, when I say elimination question, I say that because typically in the first question, we use the process of elimination. We check each of the rules and find an answer choice that is correct according to the process of elimination. We eliminate answer choices that violate any of the rules. So as you went through, for instance, sorry, I have to look at these. You guys have the questions in your packets and I don't have them in my presentation. So I'm not staring at my phone to ignore you guys. I'm looking at the questions on my phone. So for instance, you have a D gets crossed off on question 1 because Mendez isn't assigned to area 3 in D. Olson or Pruitt in area 1, that gets rid of C. Larson with Kikuchi or Mendez, but not both, that gets rid of A, and our 4th rule gets rid of B. So the correct answers for anybody who has to drop off, because I know we are already 10 minutes over, the correct answers for this game are 6, our first question, E, we just did that one, our elimination question, 7C, 8D, 9D, 10E, 11B, 12A. We can go over these a little more if you guys like. I do see a bunch of questions in the Q&A though. So I'm just going to kind of discuss very briefly. One of the most important things that as you went through you should have found is that the way to get 3 of these together is going to be J, K, and L. So if we end up having 3 in the park, notice that we've got to have J with, or L with one of K or M. And they're going to end up, as in that elimination question, J, K, and L. So let's go over this in a second. I know we're going over, so I am going to get some more Q&A first, and then I'm going to have to, I don't have them on my screen, so we're just going to have to drag over here and do it over here, but we will go over the questions. So let me get to some more Q&A real quickly. So going back up to the top, let's see. if we take LSATMax, do you pick our own timeline? Oh, and let's see. Oh, I do have, oh, for some reason, my other version of this, I do have the questions. Okay, good. All right. I'm apparently confused today. I pulled up this PDF on my computer and didn't have the questions, but the version I have on my iPad does, which is, I don't know how that happened because it's the same PDF. All right. We will do these questions all together. Let me do a little Q&A first. If you take a package with LSATMax, do you pick your own timeline, or is it given to us for our team? You can tell us when you're planning to take your test, but you can take the whole course self-paced. There's nothing that's, if you're doing the course, there's nothing that is locked until you get to where we say that you should be in your timeline. You can do it all anytime. Margarita, if you're not a citizen of US or Canada and you've registered for June, can you take LSAT-flex? Right now, the international LSAT is still scheduled for June 27th and 28th. Watch this space. It's really going to depend on the state of the virus in the world, whether or not LSAT has to cancel that one. Scratch paper on the LSAT. With Flex, they have confirmed that you can use scratch paper, but they haven't given a ton of details yet on what types of scratch paper you can use. That should be forthcoming as people get closer to the actual Flex. In the in-person LSAT, they give you a packet of scratch paper that is their paper. Just above a 3.5 GPA. Daniel, you might want to catch one of our application seminars. Maybe Claire can put the applications webinar that I recently did, the recording of that, in the chat again. That goes more into it. Top 5 law school, you know, nobody has a very guaranteed chance at top 5. Those are very, very selective law schools. The stronger that your soft variables are, the better for that. But definitely your LSAT score is about 60% of your chance at law school. So make sure that you push that as high as you possibly can. For the in-person LSAT, yes, it is on tablets. They are Microsoft Surface Go tablets. Main tips for beginning to study for the LSAT. Freshmen just begin prep and trying to figure out the best way to start. The best way to start is with a diagnostic, which is you take a practice test without any preparation whatsoever, see where you are, and then make a plan from there. So if you haven't done that yet, start with an initial diagnostic. There's a free one on TestMax. Maybe Claire can put in the chat the link to take the free first LSAT on TestMax, and then see how many points you need to gain and make your study plan based on that. What materials I used to study, I was being stubborn, and in addition to taking the LSAT, decided to set myself a challenge to make my own study plan and use as little pre-made prep materials as possible. So I did buy a Logic Games book, but I didn't take any courses. I predominantly used just getting a hold of a bunch of practice tests and literally cutting them up and making my own lessons, because I never learned study skills in college. So I wanted to use the LSAT to learn study skills, because I was one of those obnoxious people that would start the final at 2 a.m. the night before it was due at 8 a.m. and somehow still get a decent score, but that's not going to cut it in law school. And since I was still wanting to go to law school at the time, I wanted to get better. But the thing is, my hack method of coming up with my own study plan and study materials, I actually ended up like figuring out and solving on my own with much more pain and suffering than was necessary, my way to what is basically the LSATMax method of studying. Best way to practice, Geraldine, getting better at hard inferences. Very good. Repeat games. This is like, I talk a little bit more about this on the podcast, but please repeat games. Pretty please. You need to repeat games. You feel like you're average on games, but get stuck on hard inferences. Print out, pick 10 games and either print out or just do digitally 5 times each, go through them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, start again at the beginning. Obviously not all on the same day, do like 5 a day, But once you have been through all 10 of those games 5 times, you will start getting your inferences more quickly because you will have the feel for them. It is almost like a muscle memory thing. Even though I have been teaching this test for years now, I have to sometimes do this to get myself tuned back up again, because it literally is like your brain's muscle memory making those hard inferences. Repeat games. Do Ivy League law schools prefer students who are more involved on campus? Extracurriculars are always good. They want to know what type of student you're going to be. They want to know as much about how you'll be as a member of their community. Ivy League law schools let relatively few people in, so they want to make sure that they are happy with everyone they let in. So definitely, if you're still an undergrad and you have a chance to get more involved, I'd recommend it. In the case of multiple variables, Omar finds it extremely difficult and time-consuming how do you recommend we approach it during the next 4? Okay, so grouping games. Yeah, so that's very much like the Park Rangers game that we just did. So if you have multiple variables for that, so in other words, what you're asking about is variables that go multiple times, not so much multiple variable sets. So those are just advanced grouping games. So that really, even though the main diagram is going to take you a little bit more time on a complex grouping game than on a simple grouping game, you're actually going to end up making more deductions. So take the time on the setup. I know it's a little bit annoying, but you're going to end up making so many deductions on the setup that you will have to do very little work on the questions. So do your scenarios like we did with the A and B scenario for the Park Rangers game, and then roll along to the questions, and you should be able to get through those very quickly. Jelena scored a 142 on your first LSAT. I don't know if you mean you scored a 142 on your first actual official LSAT, or that you scored a 142 on your first practice test. But I think you mean your first practice test and, on your actual LSAT. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, I think gaining 8 points, the average in going through a whole course is like 10 to 11, but that's from your first diagnostic, not from having already taken an actual official LSAT. Gaining 8+ points is doable. Focus on your weaknesses. There's a lot of room to improve there. So definitely use your practice tests and your official tests that you already did to show you. If you're a TestMax student, you can use the LSATMax analytics to tell you about what types of questions you are missing the most, and then really focus on those. The best way to improve your score quickly is to focus hard on your weaknesses. I get this question a lot, Ankush, about STEM majors and a GPA break for law school, since their science GPAs do tend to be lower than GPAs in other disciplines. To a certain extent, yes, but you still have to pass the initial bar, which is based on your LSAT score and your GPA. So push your LSAT score as high as you possibly can so that you don't have your GPA just knock you out of the running. You want them to actually consider your application as an individual, which is not going to happen if your GPA is really below their bar for consideration. So the lower that your GPA is, the higher you need to push your LSAT in order to get to the point where they're actually going to pay enough attention to your application to care that you're a science major. Good material for beginning the LSAT. The LSATMax premium course is very good for beginners. But if you're not ready to get the premium course yet, there is a free trial. So, start the free trial, do as much as you can during the free trial, and then just get a hold of practice tests. The LSAT releases practice tests. They disclose, generally 2 to 3 tests a year. So there are over 90 disclosed tests out right now, and there is plenty, you can do. There's a site called LSAT Hacks. There's some free analytics on 7Sage. There is a lot that you can do for free, but once you do want to invest in something premium, then we are here for you with the LSATMax premium course. Is there a penalty for not answering all the questions? You are graded on what you complete, and you should always guess on those you don't complete. Don't give up that 20% chance of a right answer. There's no penalty for wrong answers. What is considered a competitive GPA, Alexis? That is all disclosed if you go on either US News and World Report or that law school's website. They have to disclose their GPA medians. So for your target schools, you would like to be at least at their GPA median and no lower than their 25th percentile. They are required to disclose that. Joel asked, should you guess on answers to not waste time or take your time to get the ones you can do correct? I recommend that most people guess on rule substitution questions to not waste time, but for the most part, you want to get as many as you can get correct, and then guess on what's left over if you have not done enough in the 35 minutes to get the full section done. How is the LSAT-flex different? Drastically different. It is 3 sections instead of 5 is the biggest difference. And logical reasoning is not a double section, so it only accounts for 33% of your score rather than the typical 50%. And you'll be doing it on a laptop rather than on a tablet. Drastically different. We have 2 episodes now on our podcast. First, the LSAT-flex special update, and now are improving quickly on LGNRC episode that go into this. We will be continuing to cover this. Stay tuned, but those are the big differences. The essay question, in other words, the writing sample, Jake, it is on the same, you can do it on the same day if you want to, I believe, but it's typically done on a different day. Typically you have like 6 months to do it, so don't stress about it. Worry about preparing for your LSAT. Is it better to guess on a question to save time or just skip it? Always guess. There's no penalty for guessing and guessing wrong. Is there a particular age for LSAT? I believe you have to be at least 18, but beyond that, you can take it whenever. We already talked about scratch paper. Yes, you will be able to see the webinar after it's done. Somebody asked about 3.3 GPA and going to University of Toronto. I don't know that much about GPA medians in Canada, but I believe they do also have to disclose, so check your target school's GPA medians. What online LSAT prep course would you recommend today to best prepare a student? Like, literally, I could work for any of these companies, like, not to brag or anything, it's just like, when you have a 99.9th percentile score and teaching experience, you kind of get to choose which company to work for, and I have worked for multiple of them. I'm at LSATMax for a reason. They're right now in these times where everything has to be online. I think it's good to be with the course that has been online from the beginning, not somebody who's like trying to convert an in-person class to online at the last minute. I would recommend LSATMax. If you're not going to do LSATMax, do another one that has always been online, not one that is scrambling to convert, because they're not going to have the technology experience. Time is your major problem for logic games. You always run out of time. I would recommend planning to do 3 logic games for right now, and also doing more untimed practice if you have time before your test. So not everyone is going to get 4 logic games done in 35 minutes. Most people do not. So plan for 3, plan to guess on number 4. And in the meanwhile, do repeat games and practice your solving in an untimed environment. There is like a magical irony with logic games where the more that you practice untimed, the better your timing gets. Practicing Lost Boys games, just do all of them. There's not that many of them, just do all of them. We already talked about how LSAT-flex differs. That is over. How many types of logic games are there, and what's the best way to study them? There are 4 basic types: sequencing, grouping, hybrid, and the Lost Boys. There are subtypes within each. The best way to study them is to do them and to use whatever resources you are using to learn how to do the diagramming, and then go back and do them all again. Repeating games is wonderful. Kaya says, my problem has always been knowing when to stop diagramming. Sometimes you find yourself making too many assumptions. Don't make assumptions, make deductions. Assumptions are poison on logic games. When to stop, if your little pencil stops moving for more than 10 or 15 seconds, go on to the questions. If you are still rapidly solving and finding new things, keep going. Amelia wants to know if you can have a plan for someone doing the exam in about a month. Yeah, it's going to be faster than the standard course, but just go faster. None of the stuff is locked until you've completed the other stuff. Just go through it quicker, you know, move through, especially you can probably skip some of the earlier lessons if you do understand like basic LR question types. We talked about that live. When applying to law school, if you improve your score after you sent in your application, how do they handle that? Like, for example, if you take June or July and apply in September and improve your score with October, be careful with that, because once you have sent in your application, if you register for a new LSAT, they are actually going to notify law schools of that, and they will not consider you until they receive your new LSAT score. So if that is what you want to happen, go ahead and do that, but they will pause their consideration of you until they get your new score. Alexa, great question. Are there any LSAT-Flex practice exams available? LSATMax has a flex mode now, only on the computer, not in the mobile app. But if you are an LSATMax premium student, you can take all of the prep exams in flex mode. Right now, it is scored like a traditional LSAT, so the scoring will be a little inaccurate, but we are changing that this week. What characteristics should a person have if they want to be a lawyer? Like rules-based systems, enjoy working with systems that have firm rules and figuring things out within a set of rules. You should like people. You should probably like writing. You're going to be doing a lot of writing. And you should have a high tolerance for long hours and repetitive work, and probably a general belief in the legal system of the country that you intend to practice in, even if you think that it could stand to improve, you know, generally thinking that there is some good to that system would be good for a lawyer. Is it possible to get tutoring without purchasing the premium course? I think you can get tutoring without getting the full 4-month premium course. I am not 100% sure. I will kick that one to Claire in the chat. How many total games are on the exam? Well, that depends on if you get a experimental section, which exists on the in-person LSAT, but not on Flex. If you have an experimental section and it happens to be games, you'll have 8, otherwise you'll have 4. I don't know what LCAS, you mean LSAC? What else does LSATMax subscription offer? We have video lessons for, let's see, I will actually scroll down and show you. I have a slide on my computer for that. We have 100+ hours of video lessons, weekly office hours, message boards, 4 textbooks, lifetime access, personalized support from 99th percentile instructors, a digital LSAT simulator, and we guarantee your score will improve. Do I do private tutoring? Right now, I'm not taking private tutoring students because I am working on a bunch of updates to the course curriculum. So trying to help as many people as possible versus one at a time. However, we have a lot of wonderful instructors that do, and everybody that I've worked with at LSATMax, that we're all 99th percentile, and everybody has previous teaching experience and is great. So yes, there's tutoring available. How do you know if your setup for a game is correct? Yes, everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, literally. Like, I have been teaching for years and I make mistakes setting up my logic games, like every time I do a logic game section. That is fine. You catch yourself by using the questions. The questions allow you to catch yourself. The elimination question is the best one for that. If you have misunderstood a rule in the setup, use the elimination question to do that. If you are confused, you'll somehow end up with either no correct answers on the elimination question or 2 correct answers, and that should set off like sirens and bells and whistles in your head that you've misunderstood or misdiagrammed a rule. Is it better to reschedule your LSAT date or do it a second time? I would just do it a second time, especially if you're too late to get a refund, because sometimes having been in the real environment and gone through that stress will help you on the second time. Your Horace, your graduate school GPA is not considered by law schools. I'm sorry, I know that sucks. They only consider your GPA from before your first bachelor's degree. How many hours do I recommend you practice a day max? I would recommend that you practice 3 to 4 hours a day max. I don't really think practicing for 6 or 8 hours is helpful. I think you're gonna burn out at that point. So, and I also recommend that you don't practice every section every day. So I would say try to practice maybe 1 to 2 sections per day. So don't practice logic games every day. Don't practice reading comp every day. Don't practice LR every day. So arrange it that way. I like people to take 1 practice test a week and to plan their study plan based on their weaknesses from their most recent practice test. Christina is in the active military, changing branches to JAG. Congrats on that decision. JAG is a great employer for lawyers. I have heard from my students who go that route. Yes, they will still look at your undergrad despite it being a decade, but they will see the date on it and they will value it a little bit less because of all of your experience since undergrad. Unfortunately, they do not consider your graduate school GPA, although you can tell them about it in an addendum, which is something we discuss in the applications webinar. Already answered that from Ankush. Essay, yes, it's a writing sample. It's not very important. Don't screw it up completely. Don't have a bunch of misspellings or fail to answer the prompt, but don't stress about it. Your personal statement is far more important. Below bar, under 25th percentile. Yeah, shoot for the median ideally, but under 25th percentile, you're probably going to have a very outstanding application otherwise to be seriously considered. You also don't even need the free trial for a diagnostic. So you can just get one there. You can literally just take a free diagnostic on our website anytime you want to. Ashley, if you're planning on studying for a whole year, you get free lifetime access when you get the premium course from LSATMax. We don't shut you out of it. You get lifetime access to everything. So that is good. 3.98 GPA and median score of 156 for the law school you're looking at, Theo. What should be your goal score? Ideally get over their median. Your GPA is great, but the LSAT is still 60% and the GPA is 40%. I'd say shoot for 160. Yes, repeat the same game multiple times. Yoli, if you have time left over, no, unfortunately, you don't get to bank your time. I would love that because I always have a ton of time left over on LR, but they do not allow it. We did that question already. How do law schools look at it when you take the test twice and score differently? Josh, they take your higher score and don't listen to anybody who tells you differently. There's some pessimists on like Quora and Reddit who will tell you that they average it out. That's not true. Your school doesn't have GPAs. Should you convert your grades or use a 100 scale? Oof, that's tough. I would suggest contacting the schools that you intend to apply to about that and see what they would prefer. Humza, I don't know if the person who said this can see this, so I'll read this out. Humza says to the person who was from U of Toronto, I'm pretty sure Windsor has a low median GPA as well as the University of Saskatchewan, so check those out. Caitlin, how much prep time is recommended between beginning prep and test date? I like people to have at least 3 months. More is better. 6 months would be great. when I say repeating games, do I mean repeating the exact same questions you already did? Yes, but do it in a set of 10 so that you're not doing the same one and then going right back and doing the same one, but do the same set of 10 5 times. Can you use a pen on your scratch paper? No, you can only use a number 2 pencil at this time, or HB. When is the latest the LSAT should be taken for a fall 2021 acceptance to law school? Shoot for, ideally take it by September of 2020. But if you can't, then shoot for at least by January of 2021. There are a few law schools you can apply to later than that, but really not the most ideal. Someone wants Claire to put information on purchasing tutoring sessions. If you can put that in the chat, Claire. Pass, no pass. Does taking classes pass, no pass have negative effects on law school admissions, even if the classes were taken for fun and not for your major, minor? They're going to affect your LSAT GPA, which is different than the GPA that shows on your transcript. So if you can convert it and your actual grades are good, if you can convert it, maybe do convert it. If the grades are going to be good. We already talked about how long to practice. Is 4 months of practicing every day for 4 hours enough to get a high score on the LSAT? First of all, don't practice every day. Give yourself at least 1 day off a week, ideally 2, because you do actually have to convert short-term memory to long-term memory, and your brain has a very hard time doing that if you are constantly filling it with new LSAT information. But yes, 4 hours every day, 4 months of 4 hours every practice day is a solid amount of practice if you are practicing correctly. If you're practicing incorrectly, it doesn't matter how long you do it. Maximum number of times a person should take the LSAT. There are maximums now. There used to be essentially no maximum. They have added maximums now. For instance, you can only take 3 a year. You can go up to the maximum if you want to, but if your score is not changing or your score is going down, that will look bad. Curious how the LSAT has changed since 2001. Not drastically. Comparative reading is new. You get a reading comp passage with 2 perspectives now, which you didn't get before. But other than that, it's not changed that much. We have Lost Boys games, circular games are back, which were not around since the 90s and 2001. Other than that, it's pretty much the same test. I still use practice tests from the 1990s in my students' prep, and that is fine. Daryl has a 2.99 GPA. What score do you recommend? As high as possible. That's going to be below the 25th percentile at a lot of good law schools. So try to get your LSAT score as high as you possibly can to outweigh that. For the U of T question, yeah, as a Canadian, U of S or TRU might be good too. Okay, I will trust you on that. I'm not a Canadian. If you got mid 150s on diagnostic with no preparation, would a 170 score be a reasonable expectation? Shoot for it. I truly believe that anybody who has a decent reading speed and a basic aptitude for logic, who is willing to dedicate themselves and make changes as necessary, can get a 170 plus score. Now, statistically, those are 99th percentile or 98th percentile, depending on the test scores. So that means you do have to do better than 98 to 99% of people who are studying for the same test. That is, I am not trying to minimize how hard that is, but if you are willing to put the effort in, I think you should shoot for that. What ABA accredited schools have complete distance learning JD programs? Well, all of them right now. They're all online right now. For next year, I don't know how many of them are going to still be there. So that is, as far as, I don't have a list of all of the ones that do distance learning all the time, but right now everybody's distance learning. Is it a good idea to volunteer or try to work for a law firm or courthouse prior to applying to law school? Yeah, anything that helps you decide that you for sure want to be a lawyer, they like, because what law schools do not like is for you to go take up a legal education and then not go be a lawyer. It looks bad for their stats, so they like to admit students that already for sure know they want to be a lawyer. Amy, oh, 5 boys. My heart goes out to you, raising 5 boys and going to grad school. Oh my God, single mom. Okay, so you are a badass. If life got in the way, should you still take your May LSAT-Flex even if you're just beginning to study now? Ooh, if you're just beginning, since June is going to be LSAT-Flex 2, I'd put it off to June if you are literally just beginning. But congratulations on following the calling to law school even after raising 5 kids. Practice correctly. Correct practice focuses on your weaknesses and focuses on what you need to change. So if you just drill and drill and drill and do not figure out what you need to change, now that is stuff that it really helps to go over with someone one-on-one or to come to an office hours where there are fewer people to figure out what you might need to work on, or talk to a friend who's also studying who's farther along and get them to help you. But you must focus on your weaknesses, you must practice test yourself, and you must analyze what you are doing wrong and what you need to change. Ashley, with a 3.6 GPA, what should be your LSAT score goal? Always the answer is as high as possible, but it really depends on what schools you're going to. If you're applying to schools that your 3.6 is below their median, then try to get your LSAT score at their 75th percentile or above. Do they look at cumulative GPA or GPA in your major? Neither. They look at the GPA that LSAC gives you, which is going to be different from either. It is going to use all of your undergraduate credits before your first bachelor's degree. So you just get your transcripts to LSAC, sign up for credential assembly service, and they will give you the GPA that law schools consider. How much do internships matter in the application process? Not a whole lot unless it's like a really, really incredible internship, but it does help to have some work experience. It's just going to go on your resume. They review your resume. It doesn't matter as much as your LSAT or your GPA. Have I ever witnessed someone with a low GPA and a 152 LSAT score be successful in law school? It depends what law school. You know, that's probably not a profile of somebody who is going to get into a top 25 or top 50 law school. That could be somebody who gets into, like locally, if you were in LA where I live, I would advise you to apply to Southwestern, and I've had people with that profile do well at Southwestern. It is, if school has historically been hard for you and the LSAT was hard for you, law school is going to be hard for you. That doesn't mean that you can't be a great lawyer. Being a lawyer is not a whole lot like law school. That doesn't mean you can't pass the bar, but it does mean you should consider and maybe study a little bit about what the bar is before you make the decision to go to law school, to make sure you feel like you can pass the bar, because if you don't pass the bar, no matter how good your law school grades are, you don't get to be a lawyer. So think about bar passage. But yeah, I have had people with that profile go to lower ranking accredited, ABA accredited law schools and do well there. Do you have to go to law school in order to become a detective? This is like my favorite question because I'm addicted to detective TV shows. And I almost became, I had a moment where I applied to be a PI's assistant, and then I got lost on the way to the interview, and fate decided I was not going to become a detective and live out my Rex Stout, Nero Wolfe, Archie Goodwin dreams. No, you don't have to go to law school to become a detective. You need a private investigator's license, and you should do an internship with a private investigator and make sure you like following people who are having affairs around. Or you can join the police and become a police detective. Either way, you don't need law school. Extra advice for people taking the LSAT Flex, bring up your LG and RC scores. Planning to take the LSAT in October, is that too late to apply for fall 2021? No, that's fine. The best time to apply is the first day of application season, but the second best time to apply is like the first half of November to December. If you can get everything ready before your LSAT score, get your personal statement and your letters of reference ahead of time, do that. But yeah, make sure that you have as much ready as you can so that as soon as you get your score, you can press send on your application. Want to test in August? Is studying from now till then 4 hours a day enough? Yeah, but give yourself 1 to 2 days off per week. Don't study literally every day. Legal studies major in undergrad where actual attorneys and law school professors teach courses. Will that look good for law school admission or not necessarily because so few schools offer this major? It'll look good. Yeah, that'll help them know that you really are serious about wanting to be a lawyer and that you've been around real lawyers. The only problem with it is just that everybody who's a legal studies major is going to be applying to law school, so you won't be as unique. There may not be very many schools that offer the major, but everyone in that major is going to be applying to law school. So make sure you use your personal statement to show something that's unique and interesting about you. Take the LSAT in July to get into law school this year. Deshay, probably not. I would shoot for fall 2021. That's pretty late. Any law school that's still taking applications after July of this year is probably not a good law school. 3.7, but got an LSAT score of 146, got into a couple schools for fall 2020, but the tuition is high. Yes, take a year off to get a better score on the LSAT and try to get into other schools with lower tuitions or get some scholarships. Absolutely. If you have that option and it would not throw off your whole plan about your life, if you can avoid going $60,000 a year into debt, absolutely do. How many people that have signed up for LSATMax get into law school in US or Canada? I do not have specific numbers on how many of our students are getting into law school. Maybe Claire does, but we definitely hear from people all the time who are getting accepted. I don't have an aggregate total number of students who've gotten into law school number. Maybe Claire does, but I don't think we track that because obviously we depend on them to tell us. So people who just go off and go to law school and don't tell us how they're doing, we don't know where they are. We don't get their information from the law schools. Number 5 on the grouping setup. Do you mean question 5? We'll go over those questions in a second. Someone who took an in-person prep course but feel as if they're missing some concepts. Yeah, that's normal. In-person prep courses, I used to teach them. I don't teach them anymore. It's really hard to teach in-person group courses because you have people with like a 132 diagnostic in the room with people with a 165 diagnostic. And it is very hard as an instructor to adjust the class material to both of those people's learning profiles. So I would recommend that you use whatever analytics tool you have access to, whether it's LSATMax, there's some stuff on 7Sage, or just doing your own analytics, and figure out where your weaknesses are and then find new resources to study those weaknesses and those concepts. If you can get into office hours, if you can get into any more of these webinars, that might help. But yeah, figure out your weaknesses and then find some resources that target those specific weaknesses, whether that's textbooks, online courses, tutoring, webinars. That's the best approach. Courtney, does a lawyer need to socialize? Okay, I found the introvert in the room. Not necessarily. There are plenty of types of lawyers that spend most of their time in a cubicle doing paperwork. That's more of a transactional lawyer. You will still typically, unless you start your own firm, be working with other people, so you will have to deal with coworkers, but there's definitely room for introverted lawyers in the world. You do not have to be a social butterfly to be a lawyer. It's good to generally like people because you will probably sometimes have to meet with clients, but there are also, especially in IP and patents, there are a lot of super nerdy, super introverted lawyers who just do their patent applications and do very little client interfacing. September 2020, ideal if you want to get in for 2021 fall. Even better would be June or July, but September is a great one. Is it worth taking big debt but getting into a top 10 as opposed to a free ride to a lesser one? If your heart is set on big law, go to the top 10 law school. And by big law, I mean those handful of firms that have $190,000 starting salaries and will destroy your soul but make you rich. And no judgment. I have a student right now at UCLA who's shooting for big law, and that is because she needs to pay off her debt from UCLA. No judgment on doing that. Those are hard jobs. There's a reason they pay so much. They expect a lot from you. If that's what you want, go to the top 10 law school. If you are more interested in things like opening your own practice, working for a community law firm with more like 10 or 20 lawyers, I would take the free ride and try to be at the top of your class and do a lot of networking in law school. The top 10 law schools, just basically, it is a better quality of instruction, but not dramatically better. It is the law professors are just more prestigious, have more experience, maybe are a little better teachers, but you just have a lot of access. You have a lot of access to big law firms. You have a huge alumni network. They do a lot of the networking for you by scheduling events and interviews. All you really have to do is work hard, keep your grades up, and you will have job offers. But you can still make that happen for yourself at other schools. It just means that you have to do a little bit more of the networking yourself and try to be as close to the top of your class as you can. If you want to defer your application, well, you have to redo the entire application process. I would recommend you think about it. If you are, by deferring, you mean you're not going to apply. If you've been admitted, that depends on the school's policy on deferring admissions. But the world is going to change in the next year, and your letters of reference might feel a little out of date for next year if you just submit the same ones or have your references submit the same one. How awful are the working hours for big law? Very awful. They are, a lot of firms are claiming that they're trying to make their hours better these days. Check out the blog Above the Law. That's kind of like the big law gossip blog. They talk a lot about working conditions. Read some articles on there and see what you think. But yeah, in general, like, expect that if you go big law, at least for the first few years, you are going to have very little personal life. The difference between August and September, not a drastic difference. You're just going to be able to apply earlier if you take it in August. Law schools I'd recommend for a low undergrad GPA and 155 LSAT score. You know, Southwestern has produced some good lawyers. I have nothing bad to say about Southwestern. When I taught in-person courses, I used to have a classroom there that I taught in, and they seemed like very caring people, and a lot of the students that go there are happy. So I would recommend that you apply to Southwestern. You could apply to Pepperdine. That's a little low for Pepperdine, but yeah, that's out of the lower ranking law schools in the LA area. I personally like Southwestern. They've produced some really good attorneys. Do you ever get fired as a lawyer? Yes, in fact, you will almost certainly get fired if you go big law and you stay there for 7 years and you're not yet on the partner track. That's one of the things that they don't tell you about big law, is that after 6 to 7 years, they want you to either be on track to be a partner or they will fire you. Lawyers get fired all the time. You can't get fired from your own firm though, so if you really never want to get fired, then maybe take some business classes and think about opening your own practice. Is it true that big law firms in NYC only accept from top law schools? Yes, that is not a myth. Sure, like if you are the one person at a lower ranking law school who gets like a federal clerkship or something, maybe you could go big law after your federal clerkship, but they are looking for students from top law schools. It's like going to those big consulting firms after going to Harvard for undergrad. Okay. I'm just going to take through the last question that I have here right now, which is about grouping and sequencing games, and then I'm going to go back to go over this game because Claire is kindly reminding me that if I keep answering questions, people will keep asking questions. So I'm going to go through the question about grouping and sequencing, and then I'm going to go back to the second game. All right. Done with that one. Lawyers should generally like writing. If you are not the best at reading, especially at speed, is the lawyer career path a big no-no? If you read slowly, law school will take up a lot of your time because there is a lot of reading in law school. As far as actually being a lawyer, there are career paths that are a little less reading, but they're all a lot of reading. I would say maybe try taking a speed reading course and see if you can improve that. I'm sure there are successful lawyers that are slow readers. It does make the LSAT harder, and it will make law school harder, and it will make the bar exam harder. So just think about that and figure out how much you are willing to do to become a lawyer. It can take, you know, like a year of constant study to become a good speed reader. If you're willing to put that time in, maybe try it. Is there an in-between? Unfortunately, there's not really an in-between. There are a very, very few. There's one private public interest firm in San Francisco that has 100K starting salaries. They do like the Women of Walmart lawsuit and that kind of thing. There are very, very few in-betweens in the legal profession. This is another thing that they've written a lot about on Above the Law. Most lawyer jobs either make between $60,000 and $70,000 or $190,000 the first year. It's very bifurcated, and there are fewer of the $190,000 jobs than the lower paying jobs. Will you get into Canadian law schools? I'm not super familiar with the medians for Canadian law schools, but they have to disclose those. So check the medians. If you're around the medians, then give it a try. If you're way below the medians or below the 25th percentile, lower chance. Yes, the international LSAT has not been flexed so far. Stay tuned. I think it probably will be, but they have not announced it yet. Grouping games, and okay, why are grouping games harder than sequencing games? Because most students practice them less. They're not harder. Most students just do less grouping practice. So let's go back and finish this grouping game. Okay. Yeah, you're still going to get the link to the video. Okay. Okay. We're going to go back to this game now. Let's see. Hopefully you guys still see my screen. All right, so we talked about question 1 already. Get back into this zone. Question 1 is E because, all right, let's think about this numerical distribution situation. So if we're going to try to get 3 park rangers into the same place, if O is in 2, then J has to be with K. So that JK block, let's go through these scenarios a little bit more. So that JK block, in fact, you know what? Let's move over here and play with this. So now typically I don't do sub scenarios when I'm actually taking a test, when I'm actually doing a logic game, but let's do some little sub scenarios right now. So with 1A, let's do A1, because I want you guys to have the opportunity to understand this. So M and K can't go together, and M is still down here. So L has to be with at least one of K or M. So that means that we cannot put the JK, O is in 2, so J and K must be together. And we cannot put JK in 3, so we have the option of putting JK in 1 or in 2. So let's see if it works in 2. So let's go ahead and put JK in 2. Now what I'm doing here is a conditional, not a pure scenario. A pure scenario is one that shows all of the options for the application of a particular rule. This is a sub-scenario or conditional. So let's see what happens when we put O, J, K together. Now, since L has to be with one of K or M, and there's no room for L to be with K right now, then L has to go with M. Oh, not back. So we've got O, J, K in M and L, and oops, look what happened. We cannot complete the diagram. Why can we not complete the diagram? Let me get chat back up so I can actually chat with you guys. How come this doesn't work, what I've been doing in A1 here, for those of you who are still paying attention for the grouping game? P can't be in 1, exactly. And notice that at least 1 ranger, but no more than 3, is assigned to each area. So if we leave ourselves with only P and P can't go in 1, then we are leaving ourselves with no ranger that can go in this area. All right, so let's try, since we cannot have K down here, let's try putting J and K up on top. Oh, now that works a whole lot better. Now we've got the option to put L with them or L with M, and P then is, you know, P is really only affected by the fact that it can't go in 1, so P can potentially go either. P can't go in 3 because that leaves, Ashley, that leaves 1 empty. And if you look at our distribution, every area must be patrolled by at least 1 ranger. So we can't do a 0, 3, 3 distribution. This is not allowed. We have to have either 3, 2, 3, 1, or 2, 2, 2. All right, so we have learned that if we're going to have scenario A, we have to have J and K in 1, and then L goes in one of these, so L cannot go in 2 in scenario 1, and we know that then we can place P with whichever one we have to place P with. So we either place P in 2 or 3. All right, so we can get rid of this little sub-scenario here, and now think about what we can do with scenario B, where we have M and O. Now in this one, again, we have 2 options for where we can place J and K. And however, J and K must not go together. So wherever we put our J and K, they cannot hang out. So we could do like, we can't do K and M, so let's fill up a row. Let's try filling up a row. So since we can't do K and M, let's do M and J. If we do that, then notice that because K can't be with M, or L can't be with M now, this creates an LK block that has to go somewhere. So our LK block, this also, if we do MOJ here, this also fills up 3, which forces P into 2. So now we have to put our LK block up here, because if we put it in 2, then we would end up again with the same problem. We would not be able to have area 1 patrolled by any ranger. All right. So now let's try to do in B2, let's try to do one where we don't put J with M. So we know K is not going to go here. We know P is not going to go there. Let's see if we can do nothing with M. In fact, let's see if we can get a 2, 2, 2 distribution. See if we can do like, say, if we're going to put, maybe we can put L and K. P can't go there. So if we're going to try to do a 2, 2, 2 distribution, again, P has to go in 2. And then it would have to go with J so that L and K can be together, P and J. Oh, this is interesting, seeing a pattern. In this distribution, it seems like very frequently L and K end up together. Can we break that? This is more solving than I would do typically before going on to the questions, but because we had a lot of questions about why grouping games are hard, showing you guys that you can really, if you want to, you can figure these guys out before you go into the questions if you are intimidated by the questions. O, K, P. All right, so let's see if we can split up that LK relationship. So let's see if we can put L with M. So since Olson isn't in any of the answer choices, you mean Olson isn't in 3 in any of the answer choices? This is not for the elimination question, really. I'm just figuring the game back out. We already did the elimination question. It's E. You just do the elimination question by going through each rule and eliminating the answer choice that violates that rule. So now, since we have 3 filled up, we know that we have to have one of this JK relationship in each of these. We have to split that up. And we have to have P here. So now P is with J or K, and then one of J or K is going to end up alone. Then I guess the only other option we could go do, I'm doing this a little bit like a guru game since we had some questions about guru games, even though this is not truly a guru game. Our other option here would be MOP, okay. So again, we've filled this up, and now we have to do one of J or K, one of K or J, and then we do have to place L with K because L has to go with one of K or M. All right, so this is very typical of a grouping game with 2 scenarios, one of which ends up fairly filled in and the other of which ends up less filled in after you've done the basic scenario work. We're probably going to have most of our questions touch on the B scenario because it was less filled in after the basic, just what we have in the blue scenario work. We were able to figure out more about A, which means that we're going to inevitably end up doing probably more questions about B because they like to make us work hard. All right, so one we already did. All right, if Olson is the sole ranger assigned to area 2, so what we're looking at is this one is going to make a liar out of me and tell us that we are in scenario A. So O, J, K. All right, so we're in scenario A. We know that P cannot go up in 1. Now we know that P cannot go up in 2 either because O is the sole ranger assigned to area 2. In fact, let's just put a block here so that we know we can't put any more rangers in 2. All right, where's P going? Right, which means, boom, C. So that asked us about our A scenario. We spent all of that time on our scenarios on really figuring out the game. And then, kablam, we got this question in like 15 seconds. All right, if exactly 1 ranger is assigned to area 1. Okay, so if exactly 1 ranger is assigned to area 1, which scenario are we in? Let's go back up to our scenarios. Which one allows exactly 1 ranger to be assigned to scenario 1, A or B? Anybody? This is a gimme question. It's on our scenarios. There you go. B, we've got to be in B because in A, we already have 2 rangers. Now, this is the power of scenarios versus conditionals. Scenarios are what must be true. So if you are in scenario A, you're not going to put any options, any things that could be true, could be false on there. You are going to only put the things that absolutely have to be true on there. So if you go in scenario A, must be true that J and K are in 1. We already figured that out. That was because we can't put them in 2 without ending up with P getting either forced into 1 or 1 being empty. So we've got to be in scenario B. All right, so if exactly 1 ranger is assigned to area 1, then that means that we are in scenario B. And one of these situations here is true in scenario B. So let's copy down scenario B. 1, 2, 3. So just from this, which of our answer choices do we jump to? This is enough. We don't even have to copy down the full scenario. Just this much of the scenario is enough to answer this question. Anybody see it? D, yes, good, Nishant. Olson is assigned to area 3. Power of scenarios, again, what must be true? M and O in this one have to be in 3. This is done. All right. Which of the following rangers cannot be assigned to area 3? Ooh, this is interesting because it is asking us about a basic deduction. Who is the one that cannot be with M? Which ranger cannot be with M? We made a deduction because M is always in 3. Who can't be there? K, exactly. Boom. Power of scenarios, again, we've done all of our solving before we even hit those questions. We haven't even had to do any solving in the questions so far. All right, if K is in area 2, then which of the following could be true? Which scenario can K be in area 2? A or B? B, right, okay. So if K is in area 2, this is the only one where we're gonna have to do a little bit of solving, but we've already got part of it done for us. We've got K in area 2. Then what else happens if we put K in area 2? What do we got? We got that. Now we know that we have to have, we got to separate J and K. This one, because O isn't in 2. J and K have to be separated. So could we put Jefferson in area 2? No, we can't put Jefferson in area 2 because J and K have to be separated. Can we put Jefferson in area 3? Maybe. It doesn't jump out to us as wrong necessarily, but what happens if we try it? And end up with, if we end up with, what happens if we put, in fact, we probably have a sub scenario for this over here. Notice that the only time we've been able to do MOJ in 3, we end up with P in 2. Why can't O go in 2? Because we are not in that scenario. We're in Koguchi is assigned to area 2, which means that if we are in the scenario where O goes in 2, then J and K have to be together and they end up in 1. So if we were to put Jefferson in area 3, then, well, okay, we've satisfied the rule about the being together, but then we end up with the same problem we had in scenario A, where we have no room for P anywhere except for, we have nobody left to go in 1 except for P, and P can't go in 1. So we can't do that because we've got to have a ranger patrolling area P, or else people are going to have unauthorized fires and be like socializing without masks on. Larson assigned to area 1. Larson can't be assigned to area 1 because Larson has to be with either M or K. So in fact, we can do something like that. Larson has to be in one of these spaces. Olson assigned to area 2, we know that that can't happen. Oh, Pruitt assigned to area 3. This matches one of our sub scenarios. We've got MOP over here in B4. We actually have this one. So always nice for that to match some solving work you've already done. You end up with E. Can OJ and K all go together in area 2? No, they cannot. Because you will end up with the same problem where all you have left to fill area 1 is P, and P cannot go in area 1. This has so many questions. Okay. If L and O are assigned to the same area, let's go up to our scenarios. Can we put L and O in the same scenario in either of them? Well, in fact, it does look like we can. So if L and O are together, this one we might have to do a little work in both scenarios. So in A, J, K, 2, O. So if we put L here, we know that P can't go there. Then do P or P, B. So MOL. So we copy down our two scenarios here. And is Jefferson assigned to area 3 in either of them? Absolutely not. K assigned to area 2. Possible in one of them. Let's go through the others first. L assigned to area 1, never true. O assigned to area 2. Hey, that seems possible, so we're going to have to compare them. L has to be with K or M. Very good, Nishant. So we're going to end up with O is assigned to area 2, but hold on. If O is assigned to area 2, then L cannot be with K or M. This one ends up not working. Pruitt assigned to area 3 would only work in scenario A. Wind up with B, we would end up, our final diagram would look like this. K is assigned to area 2. And by the way, a little kind of macro tip about doing these games. If you do some solving work on a question and you end up with a valid full version of the game, so something like this is a valid solution to the game, always keep it, never erase these, and try to write them neatly so you can go back to them, because very frequently they will actually solve another question for you. All right, if Jefferson is assigned to area 2, so which scenario can Jefferson be assigned to area 2 in? Go back to the basic scenarios. Which one allows Jefferson to be in scenario 2? B, exactly. All right, so we've got to be in MO down here. Jefferson is now assigned to area 2. We know that that means that K is not assigned to area 2. Can we jump to one of these? We know that K is not assigned to M, and that gives us what? That gives us our answer. Beautiful, yes, K has to be in area 1. Boom, all right. That's a challenging grouping game. That's a hard one to do when you are new to studying for the LSAT. So last question from Amir, which is related to this. Your sheet gets so messy, you're dizzy. I try to avoid drawing diagrams for each question. Those are called hypotheticals or conditionals. I try to avoid hypotheticals because I like to have my scenarios done so well that I don't need hypotheticals. If I have to, I do my hypotheticals small and next to the question. Or I write down, if I'm just doing scratch paper and doing a digital LSAT, I number my paper with the question number next to the hypothetical that is for that question, and I'll even draw a box around it when I'm done, so I know that all of that work was for one particular question. All right, kablam, the brave 84 of you out of 300 some that stayed the whole way through. What's the real life application for grouping games? Same thing, you're applying rules to facts, and that is, even though it feels so distant from what you do in the legal field, that is actually what you are doing as a lawyer. You are applying rules to the facts of your case. The rules may vary, the facts may vary, but you always have to combine them. Whatever, you know, if the law is you cannot carry a weapon in a public space unless you are a peace officer, Then in order to determine whether or not that law applies to somebody, you have to figure out what are the facts of what is a peace officer, what is a weapon. Are the facts of the case, my client a peace officer? This is a real New York case where someone who was a prison guard had a gun in a nightclub and said that it was legal because he was a prison guard, therefore he was a peace officer. He was found not to be. You're going to use your scratch paper on the LSAT-Flex. They haven't announced details on what kind of scratch paper you are allowed to use, but there will be scratch paper. They have said that you will get scratch paper, and that's what you're going to have to do. Use that scratch paper, and that's the same on the regular LSAT-Flex too, or on the regular LSAT too, because it's on a tablet now. There are no more paper LSATs. They are gonzo. All right, folks, brave soldiers hanging in there for 2.5 hours of LSAT today. I hope everybody is safe and having a decent quarantine. Scratch paper on the regular test is 8.5 by 11, and try to allocate 60% of your total solving time to the setup and 40% to the questions. All right. Have a great rest of your day, and maybe I will see some of you again tomorrow for I'm doing applications tomorrow, right, Claire? Is that right? Oh, that's a specific one. That's for a specific group. So you guys can't, that's LSAT Basics. Okay, you can't come to that one, but hopefully some of you will see us for reading comp tomorrow. All right. Have fun with that. Don't forget to, let's see, Claire, do you want to put that podcast link in there for them one more time as we go so that they can go off to listen to the podcast if they would like to do so to get more LSAT Flex advice? And yes, awesome. Thank you for all of your time today, and I will hopefully see all of you guys in some of my office hours or future webinars. Good luck sprinkling my high score dust on all of you. Happy to be here, and I will see you soon.